Hell's Angel visited his best friend's grave only to hear a little girl whisper, "He saved my mom." The headstone was simple granite, no angels or crosses, just a name and the years that bookended a life cut short. Marcus Reaper Holland, 1978-2024. Diesel stood before it with flowers he'd bought from a gas station, cheap carnations that didn't match the magnitude of the loss, and he couldn't make his knees bend to set them down. 6 months since the accident, 6 months since his road captain, his brother, his best friend had crossed the center line trying to avoid something in the road and met a semi head-on at 70 miles per hour. 6 months, and Diesel still reached for his phone every morning to text Reaper about the day's ride. The November wind cut through the cemetery like a blade, and he was about to turn away when he heard the small voice behind him, barely more than a whisper, "He saved my mom." Diesel turned to see a little girl, maybe 7 years old, standing 10 feet back with flowers of her own, her eyes too knowing for her age, and in that moment, everything he thought he knew about his brother's death shattered and reassembled into something he never could have imagined. Wait before the next ride begins. If this story already hit you right in the chest, tell us where you're watching from. To ride with the Brotherhood through the next promise, loss, or redemption, subscribe and join the club. Engines up, back to the road. Diesel was 6'4" of leather and ink, a man whose presence cleared rooms before he spoke a word. Vice president of the Hells Angels chapter in Sacramento, he'd earned his patch through 20 years of loyalty, blood, and road. His beard was streaked with gray, his knuckles scarred from fights that had meanings he'd long forgotten, and his eyes, those were the eyes of someone who'd seen too much and forgiven too little. But right now, standing in this cemetery on a Wednesday afternoon when he should have been at the clubhouse, he felt small, diminished, like grief had carved out everything that made him dangerous and left only the hollow shell of loss. The little girl stood there holding a bouquet of wildflowers that looked hand-picked, wearing a purple coat with a stain on the sleeve and shoes that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and her face was solemn, respectful, like she understood the weight of standing before the dead. "What did you say?" Diesel's voice came out rougher than he intended. The girl didn't flinch. "He saved my mom, the man buried here. Marcus Holland, he saved her life." Diesel's mind struggled to process the words. He knew every detail of Reaper's death, had read the police report so many times he could recite it. Single vehicle accident, no other cars involved. Lost control avoiding an obstruction. Dead at the scene. There was nothing in that report about saving anyone. "How?" Diesel asked, his voice softer now. "How did he save her?" The girl looked down at her flowers. "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers. My mom says it's dangerous." "Your mom's right," Diesel agreed. He took a step back, giving her space. "But I knew Marcus. He was my brother. And if he saved your mom, I need to know about it." The girl studied him, her young face serious. "You're a biker too, like him." "Yeah, like him." "Are you a good biker or a bad biker?" Despite everything, Diesel felt a smile tug at the corner of his mouth. "I try to be good, not always successful, but I try." The girl seemed to consider this. Then she walked forward and set her flowers at the base of the headstone, next to where Diesel's gas station carnation still hung in his hand. "My mom was driving home from work," the girl said quietly, her eyes on the grave. It was dark and rainy. May 23rd. She was tired. She said she was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. And then her car started making a bad sound, like grinding metal. She pulled over on the highway, and when she got out to look, she saw her wheel was coming off. The bolts were loose or broken or something. She didn't know what to do. Diesel stood frozen, listening. May 23rd, the day Reaper died. She was on the side of the highway in the rain, and she was scared because cars were going so fast, and she had to call for help, but her phone was dead. And then he pulled up, the man on the motorcycle, Marcus. He asked if she was okay, and when she showed him the wheel, he said it was dangerous. He said if she'd kept driving, the wheel would have come off and she would have crashed, maybe died. The girl's voice was steady, but Diesel could hear the emotion beneath it, the weight of understanding what almost happened. He had tools on his bike, the girl continued. He fixed the wheel enough that she could drive to a repair shop. He got all dirty and wet in the rain, and he didn't ask for money or anything. He just said, "Ride safe," and then he left. My mom cried the whole way to the shop because she said an angel on a motorcycle had saved her life. Diesel felt something hot and sharp lodge in his throat. She called him an angel. She tried to find him after, to thank him properly, but she didn't get his name or his number. She just remembered what he looked like and the patches on his vest, the skull with wings. She went to motorcycle shops and asked around, but nobody could help her. And then, the girl's voice wavered. And then, 2 weeks later, she saw his picture in the newspaper. The accident. She cried for days. She said it wasn't fair that someone who'd saved her life was gone. She said God should have taken her instead. Diesel's hand trembled as he finally knelt and placed his flowers beside the girl's. "What's your name, kid?" "Emma. Emma Chen." "Emma, I'm Diesel." And Marcus, Reaper, we called him, he was the best man I ever knew. But I didn't know about your mom, about what he did that night. The police report didn't say anything about stopping to help anyone. "Because he left before she got his information," Emma said. "He didn't want thanks. He just wanted to help." Of course he didn't, Diesel thought. That was Reaper, always first to help a stranded motorist, always willing to give his last dollar to someone who needed it more, always putting others before himself. The club had raised him about it, called him soft, but they'd loved him for it too. Because beneath all the leather and ink and loyalty to the Brotherhood, Reaper had been fundamentally good. "Is your mom here?" Diesel asked, looking around the cemetery. "She's at work. She cleans houses. I came with my grandma, but she's visiting another grave, her sister, over on the other side of the cemetery. She said I could come here first because I wanted to bring flowers for the angel man." "Does your mom come here, to his grave?" Emma nodded. "Every month, on the 23rd. She brings flowers and says thank you and tells him about me, about how I'm doing in school and what I'm learning. She says he gave her more time to be my mom, so he deserves to know that time isn't being wasted." Diesel had to look away, had to focus on something other than this little girl's face, because the emotion was too much. He stared at Reaper's headstone, at the dates, at the simple truth of a life lived and lost. "Emma!" a woman's voice called from across the cemetery. Diesel looked up, standing. "She's safe. We were just talking about Marcus." The grandmother reached them, slightly out of breath, her hand on Emma's shoulder. "Emma, I told you not to wander off." She looked at Diesel with wariness, this large, rough man with his leather vest and intimidating presence, but also with recognition. "You're one of his brothers," she said, not a question. "Yes, ma'am, vice president of his chapter." The woman's expression softened slightly. "Emma, did you tell him about your mother?" "Yes, Grandma." "Good. He should know. They all should know what kind of man their brother was." She looked at Diesel directly. "My daughter doesn't talk much about what happened that night. It's too emotional for her. But when she saw his picture in the paper, when she realized the man who saved her was gone, something broke in her. She blamed herself, said if she'd just gotten his name, if she'd made him wait while she wrote down his information, he might have been somewhere else when the accident happened. Different time, different place, still alive." "That's not how it works," Diesel said firmly, "and he wouldn't want her thinking that way. I know, we all know, but grief isn't rational. The grandmother paused. She'd want to meet you, to thank someone who knew him, to talk about the man who saved her life. Would you be willing to meet with her? Diesel didn't hesitate. Yes, absolutely. Tell me when and where. The grandmother pulled out a phone, surprisingly modern for someone her age, and they exchanged numbers. Her name was Lynn, she told him, and her daughter Sophie worked 6 days a week trying to make ends meet, but she'd make time for this, for him. After they left, Emma waving goodbye over her shoulder, Diesel stood alone at Reaper's grave for a long time. He thought about that night in May, about Reaper riding home in the rain after helping a stranger, about how he'd crossed that center line 20 minutes later, maybe distracted, maybe tired, maybe thinking about the woman he'd helped and hoping she made it home safe. He thought about all the times Reaper had stopped to help someone on the side of the road. All the times he'd been late to club meetings because he'd spotted someone in trouble and couldn't ride past. All the times the brothers had given him shit about it, and all the times Reaper had just smiled and said, "Could have been one of us." And now Diesel understood that Reaper's last act on this earth had been exactly what his entire life had been about, helping someone who needed it, expecting nothing in return, making the world a tiny bit better before he left it. "You magnificent bastard," Diesel whispered to the headstone. "You went out exactly the way you lived, and that little girl, that mom, they're alive because of you. That's legacy, brother. That's what matters." He pulled out his phone and took a picture of the flowers, his gas station carnations and Emma's hand-picked wildflowers, sitting together at the base of the grave. Then he texted it to the club's group chat with a message. "Need everyone at the clubhouse tonight, 7 p.m. Mandatory. It's about Reaper." The responses came quickly. Questions, concern, confusion. Diesel didn't answer any of them. Some things had to be said face to face, brother to brother, with the whole chapter present. He stayed at the cemetery until the light began to fade, just standing there, talking to Reaper the way he used to when his friend was alive, telling him about the club, about the brothers, about the hole his absence had left, and telling him about Emma and Sophie, about the lives he'd saved with his last act of kindness. When he finally left, Diesel felt different. Not healed. Grief didn't work that way. But shifted. Like he'd been carrying his loss wrong, focusing on what was taken instead of what remained. Reaper was gone, but his impact lived on. In a little girl who brought flowers. In a mother who visited every month to say thank you. In the brothers who would carry his memory forward. That evening, the clubhouse was packed. Word had spread that the VP was calling a mandatory meeting about Reaper, and everyone wanted to be there. Some had ridden hours to make it. The room was heavy with anticipation and concern. Diesel stood at the front, looking out at 50 faces. Brothers who'd ridden with Reaper, who'd laughed with him, who'd mourned him. The club president, a man called Knox, sat to Diesel's right, his expression questioning but patient. 6 months ago, Diesel began, we lost our road captain, our brother, our friend. We buried him and we mourned him, and we tried to make sense of a senseless accident. We asked ourselves why, and we didn't get any answers. Just the cold fact that Reaper crossed the center line on a rainy night and didn't come home. The room was silent, every eye on him. Today, I went to his grave, like I do every few weeks. Bring him flowers, talk to him, try to make peace with the hole he left. And while I was there, I met a little girl, 7 years old. She came to bring flowers too. He pulled out his phone and held up the picture. This is Emma. And she told me something I didn't know, something none of us knew. On the night Reaper died, before the accident, he stopped to help a woman on the side of the highway. Her wheel was coming off her car. If she'd kept driving, she would have crashed, probably died. Reaper fixed it enough that she could get to safety. He saved her life. And then he got back on his bike and rode into the night, and 20 minutes later, he was gone. Murmurs rippled through the room, brothers exchanging glances, processing this new information. "That woman is Emma's mother," Diesel continued. "She's been visiting Reaper's grave every month since his death, bringing flowers, saying thank you to the man who gave her more time with her daughter. She tried to find him after he helped her, wanted to thank him properly, but she never got his name. And then she saw his picture in the paper and realized the angel on the motorcycle who'd saved her life was gone." Knox spoke up, his voice rough with emotion. "He never told us, never mentioned helping anyone that night." "Of course he didn't," said a brother named Hawk from the back. "That was Reaper. Helping people was just what he did, like breathing. Didn't need recognition or thanks." "Exactly," Diesel agreed. "And that's what I wanted you all to know. Reaper didn't die for nothing. He didn't just lose control for no reason. He died being exactly who he always was. A man who helped anyone who needed it, who put others first, who made the world better just by being in it. His last act on this earth was saving a life. That's the legacy he left. That's what we need to remember." The room erupted in voices, some sharing memories of Reaper helping them, others recounting times he'd stopped for strangers, all of them suddenly seeing his death through a new lens. Not just tragedy, but sacrifice. Not just loss, but purpose. Knox stood and raised his hand for silence. When the room quieted, he spoke. "Brothers, what Diesel has shared tonight changes how we remember our fallen road captain. Reaper lived with honor, rode with loyalty, and died helping someone in need. That's the highest ideal of what we claim to be. We talk about brotherhood, about protecting our own, about standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves. Reaper didn't just talk about it, he lived it, every single day. We need to honor that," called out a brother named Cole. "Do something that acknowledges what he stood for." "Agreed," Knox said. He looked at Diesel. "You got any ideas?" Diesel had been thinking about this all afternoon. "Yeah, I do. Reaper was always helping stranded motorists, right? Always stopping when he saw someone broken down. What if we formalized it, made it part of our identity? Any brother who sees someone in trouble on the road, they stop and help. We carry tools, we carry phone chargers, we carry whatever might be needed. We become the riders who help instead of the riders people are afraid of." "The Reaper Protocol," someone suggested. The name stuck immediately. Brothers nodded, voiced agreement, banged fists on tables. "The Reaper Protocol," Knox repeated. "I like it. We make it official. Add it to our bylaws. Any brother who passes someone in need without offering help answers to the club. We do this in Reaper's name. We make sure his legacy lives on." The vote was unanimous. After the meeting, as brothers lingered to share stories and drinks, Diesel's phone buzzed. A text from Lynn, the grandmother. "Sophie wants to meet. This Saturday, 2 p.m. if you're available. There's a coffee shop near the cemetery. The Roasted Bean. Would that work?" Diesel replied immediately, "I'll be there." The days between that Wednesday and Saturday moved slowly. Diesel found himself thinking constantly about Sophie, about what he would say to her, about how Reaper's death had rippled outward in ways none of them had known. He wondered if the guilt Lynn mentioned was eating Sophie alive, if she spent sleepless nights thinking about what-ifs and parallel timelines. He knew that feeling. He'd spent 6 months torturing himself with similar thoughts. If I'd ridden with him that night, if I'd called him earlier, if I'd convinced him to wait out the rain at the clubhouse. But guilt was a poison that didn't heal anything, and he suspected Sophie needed to hear that as much as he'd needed to learn it. Saturday came cold and gray, with the kind of November weather that made you question why anyone lived this far north. Diesel arrived at the Roasted Bean 15 minutes early, ordered a black coffee he didn't really want, and waited at a corner table where he could see the door. At exactly 2 o'clock, a woman walked in with Emma beside her. Diesel recognized Emma immediately, but the woman, Sophie, was younger than he'd expected. 30s, maybe, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the kind of exhaustion in her eyes that spoke of working too many hours for too little pay. She wore scrubs under a winter coat, and her hands shook slightly as she scanned the coffee shop. Diesel stood, and their eyes met. Recognition flashed across Sophie's face, not of him specifically, but of what he represented. The leather vest, the patches, the connection to the man who'd saved her. He walked over and extended his hand. "Sophie, I'm Diesel." She took his hand, and he was surprised by the strength of her grip. "Thank you for meeting me. I know this is unusual." "Nothing unusual about it," Diesel said. "You wanted to talk about Reaper. That's all I ever want to do these days." Emma smiled up at him. "Hi, Mr. Diesel." "Hey, Emma, you want something to drink? Hot chocolate?" "Can I, Mom?" Sophie nodded, and Diesel ordered hot chocolate for Emma and tea for Sophie. They settled at the corner table, Emma swinging her legs and chattering about school, while the adults tried to figure out how to start this conversation. Finally, Sophie spoke. "Emma told you what happened the night Marcus helped me?" "She did, and I'm sorry we didn't know. Sorry that you've been carrying this alone for 6 months." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I've been to his grave 14 times. Once on the day I found out he died, once on his birthday that I learned from the obituary, and once a month on the 23rd since then. And every time I've tried to explain to him how grateful I am, how his stopping for me meant Emma still has a mother, how I think about him every single day. But it never feels like enough. How do you thank someone who's not there anymore? How do you repay a debt to a ghost?" Diesel understood that feeling. You don't repay it. You pay it forward. You become the kind of person who would do the same thing for someone else. You live in a way that honors what he gave you. "That's what my mom says, but it doesn't stop the guilt." "Guilt about what?" Sophie's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "If I'd made him stay longer, if I'd gotten his information, his phone number, made him wait while I called a tow truck to be sure the fix would hold, if I'd delayed him by 10 minutes, by 5 minutes even, he wouldn't have been on that road at that exact moment. The timing would have been different. He'd still be alive." Diesel leaned forward. "Sophie, listen to me. That kind of thinking will destroy you. I know because I've been doing the same thing. If I'd ridden with him that night, if I'd called him, if. But the truth is, we don't control time. We don't control fate. And Reaper, Marcus, he made a choice to stop and help you. That was his choice, his decision. And knowing him the way I did, he wouldn't regret it for a second, not even if he knew what was coming. How can you be sure? Because that's who he was. Helping people was his nature. It's what made him a great road captain, a great brother, a great man. If you'd been selfish that night, if you'd demanded his time and information and made him stay, he might have gotten home safe. But then he wouldn't have been the man who stopped to help you in the first place. You can't have it both ways." Sophie wiped her eyes. "I've never thought about it like that." "Neither have I, until recently," Diesel admitted. "I've been angry at the universe for taking him. Angry at the semi-driver, even though it wasn't his fault. Angry at Reaper for not being more careful. But meeting Emma, learning about what he did that night, it changed something for me. I can see his death as tragedy, or I can see it as the final chapter in a life well lived, a life that mattered, a life that saved yours." Emma had been listening quietly, her hot chocolate growing cold in front of her. Now she spoke up. "Mom, maybe Mr. Diesel is right. Maybe Marcus wanted you to be happy, not sad. Maybe he'd want you to stop crying about him." Sophie laughed through her tears. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm 7. I know lots of things." Diesel smiled. "She's got a point. Reaper wouldn't want you carrying guilt. He'd want you living, really living, making the most of the time he helped give you." "I am trying," Sophie said. "Every day I try to be a better mom, a better person. I volunteer at Emma's school when I can. I stop when I see someone who needs help, even if it's just directions or a phone charger. Small things, but I'm trying to live in a way that would make him proud." "Then you're doing it right," Diesel said. "That's all any of us can do. Live in a way that honors the people we've lost." They talked for another hour. Sophie told Diesel everything she could remember about that night. How scared she'd been, how calm Marcus had been, how he'd worked on her wheel in the pouring rain without complaint, how he'd refused money when she tried to pay him, how he'd just said, "Ride safe," and disappeared into the night like he'd never been there at all. And Diesel told Sophie about Reaper, about the man behind the nickname, about his loyalty to the club, his terrible jokes, his collection of motorcycle repair manuals he'd read cover to cover, his habit of buying rounds for everyone even when money was tight, about how he'd been the heart of the chapter, the one who kept everyone together when tensions ran high, the peacemaker and the protector. Emma listened to all of it, absorbing these stories about the angel man who'd saved her mother, building a picture in her young mind of someone she'd never meet but would always remember. Finally, as the coffee shop began to fill with the late afternoon crowd, Sophie checked her watch. "I have to go. I have another house to clean before dark." "Thank you for meeting me," Diesel said. "This meant more than you know. Thank you for telling me about him, for letting me know that other people loved him too, that I'm not alone in missing him." As they stood to leave, Emma tugged on Diesel's vest. "Mr. Diesel, will you come back to visit Marcus's grave with us? Next month, on the 23rd? Diesel felt his throat tighten. "Yeah, kid, I'll be there." Sophie met his eyes over her daughter's head, and something passed between them. An understanding, a shared grief, a mutual recognition that they were both part of Reaper's legacy now, whether they'd planned to be or not. Over the following weeks, Diesel found himself thinking constantly about that conversation, about Sophie's guilt and Emma's innocence and Reaper's final act of kindness. He shared the story with the club again in more detail this time and watched as it changed how the brothers thought about their fallen road captain. The Reaper Protocol became more than just a rule. It became a mission. Brothers started carrying extra tools, jumper cables, phone chargers, first aid kits. They stopped for stranded motorists they would have passed before. They helped elderly people carry groceries, gave directions to lost travelers, checked on lone riders broken down on the shoulder. And every time they did, they thought of Reaper. Every time they helped someone, they were honoring him, living his legacy, proving that his death had meaning beyond tragedy. Word spread to other chapters. The Reaper Protocol got adopted across the state, then neighboring states. Brothers who'd never met Marcus Holland were now stopping to help strangers in his name. His impact expanded far beyond what any single life should reasonably touch. Diesel tracked all of it with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Proud that his brother's legacy was growing, sorrowful that Reaper wasn't here to see it. On December 23rd, 7 months after Reaper's death, Diesel rode to the cemetery. It was colder than the last time, with frost on the headstones and his breath visible in the morning air. He arrived early, wanting time alone with his brother before Sophie and Emma showed up. He brought better flowers this time, a proper bouquet from a real florist, winter roses that had cost more than he'd admit to the other brothers. He set them at the base of the headstone and knelt in the frost. "Hey, brother," he said quietly. "It's been a month. A lot's happened. The Reaper Protocol is spreading. Brothers across 5 states are stopping to help people now, all because of you. All because of what you did that last night. Sophie and Emma are coming soon. Sophie's doing better, I think. Still carrying guilt, but also carrying gratitude. And Emma? She's something special, Reaper. Smart as hell, kind like her mom, and she talks about you like you're a superhero. Which I guess you kinda were. He paused, collecting his thoughts. I miss you, man. Every damn day. The clubhouse isn't the same without you. The rides aren't the same. Nothing's the same. But I'm learning to carry it better. Learning that grief doesn't mean forgetting, and remembering doesn't have to hurt so much. You taught me that, even in death. You taught us all that. The sound of a car pulling up made Diesel turn. Sophie's old Honda, its passenger wheel now properly secured with new bolts. She parked and helped Emma out, and they walked across the frost-covered grass carrying flowers. Good morning, Sophie said softly. Morning, Diesel replied, standing. Cold one today. Yeah, but we promised. She looked at Emma. We always keep our promises to Marcus. Emma set her flowers down. Wildflowers again, though Diesel couldn't imagine where she'd found them in late December. Maybe artificial ones, but the gesture remained the same. Hi, Marcus, Emma said to the headstone. I'm doing really good in school. I got an A on my math test, and my teacher said I'm reading at a 5th grade level, even though I'm only in 2nd grade. My mom says that's because I practice every night, but I think it's also because you're watching out for me, like a guardian angel. Sophie knelt beside her daughter. Things are getting a little better for us. I got a raise at one of my cleaning jobs. Not much, but enough to matter. And I've been following through on what I told you, trying to help people when I can. Last week, I helped a woman whose car died in the grocery store parking lot, gave her a jump start. I thought of you the whole time. Diesel listened as they talked to Reaper, their voices mixing with the wind, their words creating a bridge between the living and the dead. And he understood that this connection, this continued relationship with someone gone, this was how people survived loss. Not by forgetting, not by moving on, but by carrying forward, by staying connected to the love and lessons that remained even when the person didn't. After a while, Emma looked up at Diesel. Do you want to say something? I already did, Diesel said, but I can say it again, out loud this time. He looked at the headstone. Your legacy is growing, brother. Every day, more people understand what you stood for. More brothers are living by your example. And these two, he gestured to Sophie and Emma, they're living proof that one good act can ripple outward forever. You saved a life, and that life is touching other lives, and on it goes. That's immortality, Reaper. That's what it means to matter. They stood together in silence for a few minutes, 3 people bound by their connection to someone lost. Then Sophie checked her watch. I have to get Emma to my mom's house. I have a shift starting at noon. Before you go, Diesel said, I wanted to give you something. He reached into his vest and pulled out a small leather patch. It was circular, about 2 inches across, with a simple design, angel wings behind a motorcycle wheel, and the initials MH stitched in silver thread. The club made these, Diesel explained, to commemorate Reaper and the protocol we started in his name. I thought you might want one, to remember him by. Sophie took the patch with shaking hands. Thank you. I'll treasure this. There's more, Diesel continued. The club took a vote. Every year on May 23rd, we're going to do a charity ride. Proceeds go to helping single mothers in need, car repairs, childcare costs, whatever helps them stay safe and stay together with their kids. We're calling it the Reaper Ride, and we'd like you and Emma to be there, to lead it off if you're willing. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. We'd be honored. First ride is in May, 5 months from now, but we wanted you to know about it now. Wanted you to know that Reaper's impact isn't ending, it's growing. He would have loved this, Sophie said. All of it. He'd probably be embarrassed, but he'd love it. Yeah, Diesel agreed with a smile. He never liked being the center of attention. They said their goodbyes and agreed to meet again next month on the 23rd. As Sophie and Emma walked back to their car, Diesel stayed behind, watching them go. Emma turned back once and waved, and Diesel waved back. "You did good, Reaper," he said to the headstone. "You left us something real, something that matters, and we're going to make sure it keeps mattering, long after all of us are gone." The months that followed brought changes to everyone touched by Reaper's story. The Reaper Protocol continued to spread, becoming part of the culture not just in Hell's Angels chapters, but in other clubs who heard the story and adopted the mission. Bikers who'd once been viewed as dangerous or threatening started being seen as protectors, as helpers, as the good guys. Sophie's life improved too. The race helped, but more than that, she stopped carrying the guilt. She still missed Reaper, still thought of him often, but she'd transformed that grief into purpose. She volunteered at a women's shelter, teaching car maintenance basics so women wouldn't be stranded and vulnerable. She paid forward what Reaper had given her. And Emma grew up knowing that she'd been saved by an angel on a motorcycle, and that kindness was the highest calling anyone could answer. In March, Diesel got a call from Knox. "We need to talk about something. In person." They met at a diner far from the clubhouse, neutral territory, which made Diesel nervous. When Knox was being formal, it usually meant serious business. "What's going on?" Diesel asked after they'd ordered. Knox pulled out his phone and showed Diesel a news article. "You seen this?" The headline read, "Motorcycle Clubs Adopt Reaper Protocol, Become Highway Helpers." The article detailed how multiple clubs across the western states had started stopping to help stranded motorists, and how communities were responding with gratitude and changed perceptions. "We're getting national attention," Knox said. "Good attention for once. Media wants to do stories. Local governments want to partner with us on highway safety initiatives. This thing you started, what Reaper started, it's becoming bigger than any of us imagined." "Is that a problem?" Diesel asked carefully. "No, it's opportunity, but it's also responsibility. We need to make sure we're ready for this, make sure we're living up to what we're claiming to be. This isn't just a nice idea anymore. It's becoming our identity." Diesel thought about that. Reaper would want us to be authentic, to do it because it's right, not because it's good PR. "Agreed, which is why I'm proposing we formalize it, create a foundation, make the Reaper Ride an annual thing, but also fund year-round programs, car repair assistance for single mothers, motorcycle safety courses for young riders, emergency roadside assistance kits we can distribute. Make it real, make it lasting." "You're talking about a lot of work." "Yeah, and I'm talking about you leading it. You knew Reaper better than anyone. You understand the mission, and Sophie and Emma trust you. This needs someone who believes in it, who'll protect what it means." That's you. Diesel sat back, processing. This would mean stepping back from some of his VP duties. It would mean fundraising, organizing, dealing with paperwork and bureaucracy and all the things he'd never been good at. But it would also mean ensuring that Reaper's legacy lived on, grew stronger, touched more lives. "All right," he said finally, "I'm in." The Reaper Foundation launched in April, just weeks before the first charity ride. Diesel threw himself into the work with an intensity that surprised even him. He coordinated with chapters across multiple states, secured permits and insurance, reached out to sponsors, and somehow convinced a local news station to cover the event. Sophie and Emma were involved in every step. Sophie helped design the route, a 100-mile loop that passed the spot where Reaper had helped her, the location where he died, and ended at the cemetery where he was buried. Emma drew the logo, a simple but powerful image of angel wings behind a motorcycle that became the foundation's symbol. On May 23rd, exactly 1 year after Reaper's death, over 300 bikes gathered for the first Reaper ride. Brothers from 5 states, riders from different clubs, independent bikers who'd heard the story and wanted to be part of something meaningful. The parking lot where they assembled was a sea of chrome and leather and patches. Sophie and Emma stood on a small platform beside Diesel, both wearing leather vests that the club had gifted them. Not member vests, but honorary cuts that showed their connection to Reaper and the Brotherhood. Diesel stepped to the microphone, his hands sweaty despite the cool morning air. Public speaking had never been his strength, but this mattered too much to let fear stop him. 1 year ago, he began, my best friend stopped to help a stranger on the side of the road. He fixed her wheel, made sure she could get to safety, and then rode off into the rain, expecting nothing in return. 20 minutes later, he was gone, dead in an accident that took him from us too soon. The crowd was silent. Hundreds of engines idled in respectful quiet. For 6 months, I thought that was the whole story. A good man died in a senseless accident. But then I learned the truth. I learned about Sophie, he gestured to her, and her daughter Emma. I learned that Reaper's last act on this earth was saving a life. And that changed everything, because it meant his death wasn't senseless. It meant he died being exactly who he always was, a helper, a protector, a brother to anyone who needed one. Sophie stepped forward, and Diesel handed her the microphone. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger as she spoke. Marcus Holland saved my life. He didn't know me, didn't owe me anything, but he stopped anyway. He got dirty and wet fixing my car in the rain, and then he left before I could even thank him. That's who he was. And when I learned he died, I felt guilty, like I'd somehow caused it by being the person who needed help that night. But Diesel taught me something important. She looked at him, then back at the crowd. He taught me that guilt doesn't honor Marcus's memory. Living does. Paying forward the kindness he showed me. Becoming the kind of person who would stop for a stranger in need. That's how we keep him alive. That's how we make sure his death meant something. Emma took the microphone next, and Diesel had to adjust it down to her height. The little girl looked out at hundreds of tough, leather-clad bikers and showed no fear. My mom is alive because of Marcus, Emma said simply, which means I still have my mom because of him. I never got to meet him, but I know he was good. I know he's watching over us. And I know that all of you who came here today, you're good too. Because you're doing what he would do. You're helping people. That makes you angels, just like him. The crowd erupted in applause and the rumble of revving engines, the biker salute, the sound of respect and agreement. Knox took the microphone and gave the final instructions, the route, the stops, the protocol for staying together. And then he said, "We ride for Reaper. We ride for Sophie and Emma. We ride for everyone who needs help on this road we all share. Engines up, brothers. Let's roll." The sound of 300 motorcycles starting in unison was like thunder. The formation rolled out slowly, respectfully, led by Sophie and Emma riding in the club's truck with Knox at the wheel. Behind them, Diesel rode Reaper's bike, a decision the club had made unanimously. Reaper's old Harley, maintained and preserved, would lead every Reaper ride from this day forward. They rode through towns where people lined the streets, through countryside where farmers stopped their work to watch, past the spot on Highway 74 where Reaper had helped Sophie, and past the intersection where he died. At each location, the formation stopped for a moment of silence, and you could feel the weight of remembrance in the air. The ride ended at the cemetery. 300 bikers filed past Reaper's grave in a line that took nearly an hour, each one placing a flower, or saying a word, or simply touching the headstone in acknowledgement. Sophie and Emma went last, and Diesel stood beside them as Emma placed a bouquet of wildflowers, real ones this time, picked that morning, at the base of the granite. "We did it, Marcus," Sophie said quietly. "Your first ride, and it was beautiful. Thank you for everything. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for changing all of us." That night, the foundation raised over $40,000, enough to fund car repairs for dozens of single mothers, to provide emergency kits to hundreds of drivers, to start scholarship programs for kids who'd lost parents in vehicle accidents. Enough to make a real difference. And every dollar, every mile ridden, every life touched, it all traced back to one man who'd stopped to help a stranger in the rain. The years that followed brought growth and change. The Reaper Foundation expanded its mission, the annual ride grew larger, and the Reaper Protocol became so widespread that highway patrols in multiple states started partnering with motorcycle clubs for roadside assistance programs. Sophie eventually went back to school, became a certified mechanic, and opened her own shop specializing in helping women learn to maintain their vehicles. Emma grew up surrounded by bikers who treated her like a niece, who taught her to ride when she was old enough, who showed her that family isn't always about blood. And Diesel found purpose in preserving his friend's legacy. The pain of loss never fully disappeared, but it transformed into something productive, something meaningful. He retired from his VP position to run the foundation full-time, and under his leadership, it became one of the most respected charitable organizations in the motorcycle community. 5 years after Reaper's death, on another cold May 23rd, Diesel stood at the grave for the annual ceremony. The ride had grown to over 1,000 participants now, so large they had to split into multiple groups and stagger the start times. But Diesel still arrived early, still came alone first to have his private moment with his brother. The headstone had changed slightly. Someone, probably Sophie, had added a small plaque at its base. Marcus Reaper Holland. He stopped to help. He saved a life. He showed us the way. 5 years, brother, Diesel said, kneeling in the grass. 5 years, and you're more present now than when you were alive. Isn't that something? You hated attention, hated being the center of anything, and now there's a whole foundation with your name. 1,000 riders coming here today because of what you did. Sophie's opening a second shop location. Emma's 12 now, wants to be a motorcycle mechanic like you were. Your impact just keeps growing. He paused, listening to the wind in the trees, imagining Reaper's response. Probably something self-deprecating, something humble, something that made everyone else feel more important than himself. I miss you, man, every day. But I'm grateful, too. Grateful that I knew you. Grateful that you taught me what really matters. Grateful that your last act on this earth showed us all how to live better lives. Footsteps behind him. Diesel turned to see Emma walking up, tall for her age, confident in a way she hadn't been as a little girl. She wore a leather jacket, not a club cut, just a jacket, but covered in patches from different rides and events she'd attended. "Hey, Diesel," she said, settling beside him in the grass. "Hey, kid, you're early. Ride doesn't start for another hour." I wanted time with him first, like you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Emma spoke again. "I've been thinking about something. Mom told me the whole story, about the night he saved her, about how you found out, about everything that came after. And I realized something. That night changed everyone's life, not just Mom's, yours too, the whole club's. All those people the foundation has helped. All of it traces back to one choice he made, to stop and help someone." "That's right," Diesel agreed. "So here's what I'm thinking. When I'm old enough, when I've learned enough, I want to keep this going. The foundation, the rides, the protocol. I want to make sure that in 50 years, people still know about Marcus Holland and what he stood for. Because if one person can create this much change just by being kind, imagine what we could all do if we tried." Diesel felt pride swell in his chest. "You know what, Emma? I think that's exactly what Reaper would want. Not a statue or a monument, but people carrying forward the work, keeping the kindness alive." "Then that's what I'll do," Emma said with the certainty of youth. "I promise him that. Right here, right now. I promise to keep helping people in his name for as long as I live." He'd be honored, Diesel said, and so am I. More footsteps. Sophie arrived with Knox and several other senior club members. Then more brothers and families and supporters of the foundation. Within 30 minutes, the cemetery was packed with people who'd come to remember and honor a man. Most of them had never met, but all of them understood. The ceremony was simple but powerful. Stories shared, tears shed, laughter at remembered jokes and moments. A moment of silence. The rumble of 1,000 engines in tribute. And flowers, so many flowers, piled at the base of the headstone until you could barely see the granite. As the crowd dispersed and riders prepared for the charity run, Diesel stayed behind one more time. Sophie and Emma stayed with him. "Thank you," Sophie said quietly, "for everything you've done, for making sure Marcus is remembered, for building something beautiful out of something tragic." "I should be thanking you," Diesel replied. "You showed me that his death had meaning, that his life had purpose beyond what we understood. You gave me that gift." Emma looked up at both of them. "He gave us all gifts. We just have to keep opening them." Wise words from a 12-year-old. But then, Emma had always been wise beyond her years. Maybe because she'd grown up knowing that her life was a gift from a stranger. Maybe because she'd spent formative years learning about kindness and sacrifice and legacy. Or maybe she was just her mother's daughter, carrying forward the lessons they'd all learned from a man who'd stopped to help on a rainy night in May. The ride that day was beautiful. Perfect weather, smooth roads, a sense of purpose and connection that transformed it from just a motorcycle run into something almost sacred. And when it ended, when the final mile was ridden and the final dollar raised and the final flower placed, Diesel felt something he hadn't felt since the day Reaper died. Peace. Not the peace of forgetting or moving on, but the peace of knowing that his brother's life and death had mattered, that the grief he'd carried for 5 years had been transformed into something productive. That loss, as terrible as it was, could still create beauty if you let it. 10 years after Reaper's death, the foundation had helped over 5,000 families. The Reaper Protocol had been adopted by motorcycle clubs internationally. And Emma, now 22, had just graduated with a degree in nonprofit management and announced her intention to take over the foundation's day-to-day operations. Diesel, now in his 50s with more gray than black in his beard, was ready to let her. Ready to step back and trust that the next generation would carry forward what he and Sophie and countless others had built. On that 10th anniversary, standing once again at Reaper's grave, Diesel brought something special. A leather-bound book, its pages filled with stories. Every person the foundation had helped had been asked to contribute a page. Their story, their gratitude, their own promise to pay forward the kindness they'd received. 5,000 stories, 5,000 lives touched, all because one man stopped to help. "This is your legacy, brother," Diesel said, placing the book at the base of the headstone. "These are the lives you changed, the ripples you created. And they keep going, keep spreading, keep touching new people every day. You wanted to make a difference, wanted to help people. Well, you did, and it's never going to stop." Emma and Sophie stood beside him, 3 generations of gratitude bound together by a man they loved in different ways. "Shall we?" Emma said, gesturing toward the road where over 2,000 motorcycles waited for the anniversary ride to begin. Yeah, Diesel agreed. Let's ride. They walked together toward the rumble of engines, toward the brotherhood, toward the road that went on forever. And Diesel knew with absolute certainty that somewhere Reaper was riding with them, not in body, but in spirit, not as a ghost, but as a guide. The road goes on forever. The brothers ride forward, and kindness, Real, genuine, sacrificial kindness never dies. It just keeps growing, keeps spreading, keeps changing the world one stopped stranger at a time.